Hey, 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 welcome back to On the Fringe. I'm Gavin Lucky and I'm here with Dave.
Hey everybody.
Hey, Dave. So today we are talking about something that is not good news that happened recently on October, what's the date? Oh my God,
I
October
think this
21st.
yes, the
So,
21st.
the 21st. That's last Tuesday from the week we're recording this. On October 21st, an American bush pilot for an organization called Serving in Mission or SIM was kidnapped, carjacked off of the street in Niamey, Niger, in the Plateau neighborhood, which I used to hang out in. I think I brought it up before on the podcast a couple of times, but I lived in Niger for about 2 years and remember it as an exciting, interesting, colorful time in my life. I have a lot of fondness for the place, and this is extremely bad news. He seems to be still alive, Mr. Kevin Rideout, but he is probably being held along the border between Niger and Mali, which at this point is lightly governed, if at all, by the central government. It's mostly controlled by terrorist groups aligned with the Islamic State. So, not great. The fact that they were able to do this literally like 2 or 3 blocks away from the presidential palace in Niamey is very disturbing. Obviously, not just for the people living there, but for the government, because that's not good. Um, that's
Right. And
not
I
good
mean
for a
this
lot
this
of
raises
reasons.
alarm bells for all of the other expats and all the other people that
Yeah.
live and that congregate in that neighborhood. And if this
Which
is
is most of them, which
right,
is
I would
most of them.
I would think if this is one of the nicest neighborhoods in the city and the
Hmm.
lack of security here, this talks about the security situation across the whole entire country.
Which has been deteriorating pretty rapidly, I would say, for the last 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. I think from about 22, 23, it's gone down pretty rapidly. There was a change in government. There was a withdrawal of French and American forces that kind of mirrored changes across the region. But right now, that part of West Africa, the Sahel, they're having a crisis in governance. And this guy was literally picked up. He was driving to the airport. And that's driving from Plateau to the airport. I've done a lot in my life. That's like kind of an arterial vein for the city. And again, the fact that they can just do this and get away pretty much scot-free is really, really, really bad. I mean, when I was living there, to be fair, when I was living there, it wasn't fantastic in that, there was a 25-kilometer perimeter around the city that you were really not supposed to leave. And when I got there in 20, I got there in 2018. When I got there in 2018, you could kind of ignore it to an extent. It wasn't that much of an issue. There weren't that many problems right next to Niamey, which is the capital. By the time I left, actually a couple of days after I left, there was a major terrorist attack about 40 kilometers away in a national park that I'd visited that I think killed 12 French nationals. So you can already see in that space of time, in 2 years, there was a pretty severe deterioration. That was before the withdrawal of American and French forces. And based on everything that I understand, the situation has gotten significantly worse since. And I mean, clearly they're just kind of unable. The government is not really able to put a tourniquet on it. They've tried what I think of as the military solution, which is you go into villages and you move people out of villages and you shoot people that you suspect are terrorists. That's not working. And at this point, there's significant issues with one, figuring out where these groups are physically located, and figuring out whether or not they're better armed than you are, which in some cases I believe they are. It's not a great situation, and yeah, if you're an expat living in Niamey, it's probably not very nice right now.
No.
Uh,
Gavin, I just
I-
want to ask really quick.
yeah, yeah,
So, when you were living there, did you hear of any similar cases like
yeah,
this?
yeah. No, so it has happened before. This is not new. But generally, when foreigners are kidnapped, it happens outside of Niamey. There were a couple of incidents sort of early in the War on Terror period, in about, I would say, the late 2000s. There were a couple of incidents in or around Niamey, and I do believe a State Department official was killed in one of them. It was an attempted kidnapping that went wrong. And there were a few incidents like that in the country that went away, but it's a constant, it's a Sahelian issue. So this is a problem right the way across, I would say, probably from Mauritania, definitely. And well, Sudan has other issues, but right the way across, it's an issue because it's a pretty good way for these groups to make money. Um, they started doing it mostly with mining employees. And recently, I do know there were four Chinese State Petroleum employees that were kidnapped in Niger. This is not an isolated incident right now. There's been a sort of staccato pattern of these groups doing this in Niger. One of the things to keep in mind if you're an American citizen in one of these states is a lot of countries are very clear that they negotiate, and America's policy is that we don't. There's a degree of caution that I think Americans tend to have because if you are I don't want to pick on anyone, but if you're a French citizen or a Canadian citizen or a Chinese citizen, yeah, those countries negotiate. They negotiate and they pay people, and it's not going to be fun, but there's going to be a handoff probably at some point. If you're an American, none of those things are guaranteed, and the position is we do not negotiate with terrorists. Well, all of the organizations kidnapping for money in the Sahel are all affiliated with organizations that the State Department has designated as terrorists. So that makes negotiations difficult, and it becomes very difficult. You wind up having to go through insurance companies, you wind up having to go through contractors, and it's this whole murky world, which someone should really write a book about at some point,
You
which
know, all those
is
back channels are just
all those back
who
channels
knows how long
and
it takes,
people.
who knows how long if it's going to work. There are so many people that have to go through to make a negotiation like this work that
And
it's
they
not
all
going to
have to
be,
be
yep,
on the level. They
yeah.
all have to be on the level, and that's really hard. Particularly, I would say, in that part of the world, it's really hard. You have to work very hard at establishing trust with a lot of people who you can never trust. So it's difficult. It's a painful situation. Secondhand, I know of people who've been peripherally involved. Someone they knew was kidnapped, or they were involved in like lobbying a congressman to get someone to negotiate with people. You do. It was, I wouldn't say it was a big feature of life when I was living there, but you definitely heard about it. I mean, I think I've told you this, Dave. When I signed my contract at the school out there, part of the insurance provision is you do get ransom insurance. You get a certain amount of money where, if in the event that you are abducted, this is what will pay out.
I
Or
never
it's,
knew that.
yeah, no, and it was a part we had to renew every year. It was a part of the contract. Hostage insurance. And you kind of have to have that if you're a contracted employee out there. It's just something that a lot of people have. And he may have had this. And there may be, again, a lot of insurance companies have people who this is their job. They go out, they establish contacts, they start talking about a price. And if you're listening and you're like, that sounds ridiculous, but I've met these people, they exist, it's a job, it's an industry, actually. And I would be very surprised if right now that's not happening. What complicates it is lack of U.S. diplomatic presence in the country, so we can't really support anyone because we're not there. By and large, we have a reduced diplomatic presence there at the moment, and we have no military presence. Also, what the Nigerian government response is going to be is, I think, murky at best because this is a big slap in the face. And I think right now, someone is probably trying to talk them out of a rescue mission, which would not go well. And that's why they're being talked out of it. The Nigerian Malian border right now is, I would say, probably one of the most dangerous places on the face of the planet. There is almost no presence from either government. And the groups that are there are some of the toughest, I would say, nastiest armed groups in that entire region. And the bar is high. You don't want to be there. You don't want to go there. It's not, it's not good. And I think if they do get him out, it will not be through, we're going to send some guys in. That would not end well.
Well,
As much as that might be tempting for people, that would not end well.
yeah. Yeah, I think this is probably going to take some time to play
Yeah.
out. Or it could be you do send some guys in there and it's over in 24 hours. It's going to be one or the other. I don't see any solution that's going to be quick.
I mean,
I see one
that's,
that's going to
you
be
know,
very quick or very drug out. Nothing in the middle.
yeah, there's gonna be no middle. It's gonna go on for years, or it's going to be, well, we got the money, let them go. Um, the U.S. has exfiltrated people successfully before. We've also not done it successfully before and lost people as a result. I don't think the other thing you have to remember is the U.S. government does not care what goes on in West Africa. And to be fair, I do think the State Department kind of told everyone to leave about a year ago. So if you're still there and you do get kidnapped, again, I do not think this guy currently, and unfortunately, again, heart goes out to the family. This guy is not on Marco Rubio's to-do list. There were a lot of other things right now. And this is not going to be a priority for anyone. Logistically, if you did want to send people in, I don't know
Not
how
going to
you're
be
going
as
to get them
easy.
there.
It's not going to be easy as
No,
it was a couple years ago.
no, because the U.S. evacuated all of our military presence in Niger, which really was our military presence in West Africa, and that was over 2,000 guys between the Air Force Base in Niamey and the Air Force Base in Agadez. That's gone now. And by the way, there two previous kidnappings in like the last couple of months. Both of those happened in Agadez, which is also I would describe as lightly governed at the moment. But yeah, there is no U.S. presence really anywhere close to any of this. So yeah, any kind of operation would be almost impossible to plan, and I think is very unlikely. Again, much more likely at the moment is this becomes a protracted insurance-led negotiation, which, to be fair, is how most of these things are resolved.
Right.
Um,
And the State Department in response is all of the U.S. Embassy personnel are essentially on lockdown. They're not allowed to go to restaurants. They're not allowed to go out in the markets and go to the streets and armed
they won't.
vehicles
I
at all
mean,
times. It's very, very
they,
strict. And I think if
yeah,
you're an American and you're out and you have something happen to you now after this event, It's going to be, hey, look, you know, this is the
Yeah,
situation. You decided not to follow
comply.
our advice and
Yeah.
you're on your own.
You're totally on your own. I mean, and I will say, based on my experience of working fairly closely with embassy personnel, yeah, we were not on lockdown, but you're not supposed to do most of those things anyways. I would say most of the markets were off limits for embassy personnel. I would say any kind of anything that would look like a public demonstration would be off limits. You were pretty restricted in what you could do. And this was before everything happened. This is going to be you don't leave the embassy. You go embassy work embassy,
Hmm.
home, boom. That's it. You're not at this point, you're not going to the supermarket, which is not great. But I completely understand because if you're if you're the guy doing security at the embassy right now, that's a high stress job. I would not want that job. And you're going, I have to minimize the risk to this institution as much as possible, and this is how you're going to do it. And the response is going to be what you said. If anything happens, you were told to comply and you didn't comply. How can we help you? So, again, if you're in that part of the world, just be aware, the cavalry is probably not around the corner.
And be careful, lie low, and don't draw attention to yourself.
No, no. Again, it's such a shame. And it's also, this is not just affecting foreigners and expats. This is affecting Nigerians because they're having to deal with this too. People are getting kidnapped, people are getting disappeared. I remember before I left through one of my contacts at the school, I was briefly involved with an NGO that was trying to rehouse people who had been displaced from the Malian border, which I just talked about. And these were internal refugees. So these were Nigerians who had to basically flee from the border region because they'd been displaced by these groups coming up from Burkina, coming across from Mali. I mean, just heartbreaking. Just totally heartbreaking. Internally displaced people in that part of the world have it very rough. And these people, and this was like 5 years ago. These people were really hurting then, and I know that situation has gotten exponentially worse since. And and this ties back to our earlier conversation with Stuart. The situation in the Sahel, the leadership of these countries cannot get a tourniquet on what's going on. There doesn't seem to be any kind of structural solution. It's just fight, fight, fight. And it's just not getting better. It's getting worse. And until they figure out a way of dealing with the sort of structural issues that underpin the insurgency, it's just going to become more and more ungovernable.
Yeah, and it's been, from what it looks like, spiraling over
Yeah.
the last few years. And
And it's just getting worse.
yep, well, we will be here to cover it, and we will be here to keep you guys updated on what goes on with this story. Thank you guys very much for listening this week to On the Fringe. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share if you haven't. If you learned something from this episode, if you enjoyed it, give us a big thumbs up. And if you didn't like it, then you can give us something else. We'll be happy and we'll take whatever we can get.
We will. We will. Thank you all very much. We're here. We're on the fringe.